UFC 251. Jose Aldo steps in for a title fight at 135 pounds against Petr Yan. And my question is, what if he wins? What if Jose Aldo wins that fight? What's it do for his legacy? Where does it put him in the all-time rankings? Right? Because think about it for a minute. Now, I know a lot of times we have these discussions and we talk about who's the GOAT, who's the greatest of all time, who's been the most dominant, who would do this and that in different eras and different divisions. And it's been going on since boxing's been around. And, it's an awesome part of the sport, right? It's an awesome part of combat sports, having these discussions and really trying to think about these fantasy matchups. But one of the things that I think is Jose Aldo is incredibly underrated. Right now, I'm not suggesting that the man's the greatest of all time. I'm not suggesting that we put him on the Mount Rushmore of MMA or something like that. But hear me out here for a second. Think about this. He was the champ at 145 pounds in the WEC. Went in there, won the belt, dominated, defended a little bit, becomes the very first 145-pound champion of the UFC. Defends the belt against everybody, a who's who of the division. Okay? Now think about this for a minute. Continually wins and defends the belt. Beats Uriah Faber, Cub Swanson, Chad Mendes twice, Kenny Florian, Renato Moicano, Jeremy Stevens. Drops down to bantamweight. Okay, now he's at 135 pounds, drops down a division. And in my opinion, and basically everybody else for the most part, beats Marlon Moraes, the number one contender. Think about that resume for a minute. Think about how that stacks up relative to everybody else. When you think about guys in MMA and the amount of future Hall of Famers that they may have on their resume, the performances they put in against the top guys, how long they've been able to dominate in their division, whether or not they've been able to move a division, right? So when you start to talk about all the most impressive guys in the UFC, and then think about that resume that Aldo has, and think about how that stacks up. Because I'd make the argument that can stack up with almost anybody. 2 wins against Chad Mendes, 2 wins against Frankie Edgar, Kenny Florian, Uriah Faber, Jeremy Stevens. Man, that's impressive. Now think about this. He comes in at 135 pounds, beats Petr Yan. Wins the belt twice at 145, comes down to 135 and wins it. And oh, by the way, he's only 33 years old. That's another thing that's crazy. I feel like we've been talking about Jose Aldo forever because he's been at the top of the game for so long. But he's only 33 years old. I mean, when he lost to McGregor and then he got smoked twice by Max Holloway, which at the time, a lot of people, and myself included, we immediately started to think okay, well, he's over. He's past his prime. He's done now. I remember he even started making comments where you thought maybe he thought it was over for him. He said he didn't want to make a title run again. He was just going to fight. He was talking about only fighting in Brazil on he was talking like a man who had one foot out the door. And look at him now, just a few years later. Look at where he's come. He's down to 135. It used to be a struggle for him to make 145. That used to be a brutal cut for him. Now he's down to 135. How dedicated is that? How much does that show that the man has and what it means to compete at the highest level? Like I said, now think about if he wins. Think about if he pulls out that victory and gets the belt against as credible as an opponent as you can imagine in Petr Yan. What's that do for his legacy? Where does that put him? Because that is going to be impressive.